after COVID. Thus, we're really, really thankful for the center. The speaker for today's Dharma talk is Venerable Chang, Dean of Sangha University at DDM. Venerable Chang visited the Dhamma Mountain San Francisco Center 5 years ago to deliver Dhamma talks. We all know that he's not only a great writer, but also an excellent thinker. I'm sure that you're all familiar with the Venerable. The topic for today's talk is clearing the hindrances on the path of practice, distilling the wisdom from Master Yongjia's Song of Enlightenment. The talk for today, it will last for 3 hours with a 10-minute break. We're really grateful for the Venerable because the lectures for today and tomorrow can be replayed on the DDM San Francisco website in the future. So please do not worry about taking notes or taking pictures of the slides. You will all be able to view the videos on the website in the future. The pens and the papers are not for taking notes today. Wish every one of you today will be able to practice without hindrances through learning about the Yongjia Song of Enlightenment. Before we officially start, let's first invite the director of DDM San Francisco Center, Venerable Chang, to give us a few words, please. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone online and in person. It's been a very difficult time in the past, and it's really a great honor to have Venerable Chang and Master Yan Dao and Chang Yao and 2 students from Sangha University to come visit the DDM San Francisco Center. I could not imagine that we would have Venerables coming to visit us a month ago. I was thinking, we were always thinking about when the COVID will end. And for be able to have visitors, including students, coming to our center in summer, this is a surprise. And I believe this is the reward for all the Bodhisattvas here in San Francisco. So we're able to have the Venerables coming to visit us. And this is a valuable opportunity that I hope all of you would cherish today to focus on the Dhamma talks. We know there have been a lot of changes going on due to COVID. I'm not sure what's coming up in the future. The focus for today is Venerable Chang. So without further ado, I'll just give it back to Venerable Chang to deliver the Dhamma talk today. Thank you very much.
And everyone, good evening, good afternoon, Amitabha. Please sit. I kind of want to take off my mask. Can I do that? It's difficult to breathe. And I've received 3 shots, so it should be okay. I've been here for 5 days, and every day when I meet practitioners here, I'll see like, oh, long time no see. And 5 years ago, I've been here, but people here are all wearing masks. So I say, oh, long time no see. And I met Anita here, and she said, this is the first time we met. So I'm not sure if I should be saying that. That means that we have some new people coming here and also some old people who are here. So hi to everyone. So the causes and conditions for this talk was when I was asked to submit an article for the humanitarian magazine, and the topic was learning from Yongjia's life, and I treat it as a learning opportunity and looked up a lot of different venerables and ancient masters writing, as well as Master Sheng Yan's book on Master Yongjia's Enlightenment. A talk was given during the 7-day retreat, and the audience was towards the retreatants. So there's very useful and a lot of practical component to it. You guys know who Yongjia is? He is a disciple of Sixth Patriarch Huineng. It's part of the Chan system. When we look at Chan system, it's a little different than when we look at the Indian systems. Our perspective will be a little bit different. From the Indian traditions, if we want to study them, it'll be a little more difficult to systematically study them. But for Chan school, it's a lot about simplifying the complexity. So from our perspective point of view, if we don't have a solid foundation, it's easy for us to misunderstand them. So relating to today's talk, we want to, the name of the talk is distilling the wisdom. It means to not take everything, because the songs of enlightenment is pretty short. In these roughly 1800 words, they were all divided into chapters, and so different people will segment them differently. So people's understanding of these songs will be a little bit different. For example, when we see the punctuations or how we break up the chapters will be a little different. This is the unique qualities of Chan, is as long as you awaken into it, you can interpret however you do. So it's a little different than the Indian tradition. We can approach it from many, many different perspectives. So the meaning of distilling the wisdom means that we're not going to look through every prose, and we also won't go through it systematically. And so the article that I wrote, the main point was about his the character and the unique qualities of the Yongjia Song of Enlightenment. So if you have any interest, Master Sheng Yan's book, the wisdom, the sword of wisdom, or Master Venerable Nanting, he also he has a section in his collection has a explanation of this book. Venerable Nanting was actually very forward thinking. There was no TV or internet, so the most common thing at the time was radio stations. So Venerable Nanting's talk was from his radio show. So today's content is borrowed mostly from Venerable Nanting and Master Sheng Yan. So if everybody who are interested in the Chan system, you could also go to these two great venerables for insights. So usually when people are approaching Buddhism, the core concept is not self and emptiness. So when we're thinking about not self, we might start from the original Buddhism. But when we look at Chan Buddhism, it of course is included, but we also look at the essence and function. It will also include Madhyamaka and not self. So from Chan, they'll usually start with the essence and function. So usually we will start from the original condition, and this is, from this perspective, it will be less risky. Usually we often think that there's something else out there that we can obtain. So when we're trying to understand Han Chan school, Chinese Chan school, the greatest fear is that we are attached to the false notion of there's a real emptiness, and the core essence of Chan is that there is nothing is true. So we come from a emptiness and of non-duality. So like another characteristics of Chan school is the essence and function. So there's a lot of analogies in the Chan school. They're all based on the concept of essence and function. So when we are interpreting, we often interpret it together. We would start from the Madhyamaka's concept, and because when we're looking at Madhyamaka, they don't talk about essence and function. And they in Madhyamaka they talk about the characteristic emptiness. It doesn't really have a dependent relationship. But when we talk about the it's kind of like what the United States is like all the states are equal, right? Is that correct? Right? Yeah. So all the states are equal. They're not like the not like a emperor system where they're hierarchical. It's so when you are understanding the function, the essence and function, you might think about it through the emperor and down the ranks. But if you're going through the Madhyamaka system, it's like they are both in equal footings. So the contrast is like when we are understanding the Chan school system, we have to think a little bit more so that we are not going off the rails, where we don't attach to wisdom or attach to Chan meditation. So the talk between the two days, the two lecture will be 4 sections. So we will first introduce Master Yongjia. Well, Yongjia is a name of a place, so it's near today what we call Wenzhou. So typically when we're understanding names of the Chan masters, the first 2 characters is referring to the place. So if we want to remember Master Sheng Yin, we might in the future they might call Master Sheng Yin as Jin Shan Sheng Yin, or we can say Ma Fa Gu Sheng Yin. So for Ji Chen, Master Ji Chen is Taiping Ji Chen because he's from the location in Malaysia, Taiping. So we don't typically call their Dharma name first. We first call them, refer to them by their location name. So as long as all the masters who come from the place called Baizhang, they're all Master Baizhangs. So so first we'll talk about the bio for Master Yongjia, and then we'll so the songs of enlightenment is at the time is written in a form that can be sung, so that you can there's a rhythm and there's a song to it. So for example, the songs from Jay Chou, we might not know all the words, but we can sing to his songs. And so this is his way of passing along his wisdom. And so the third part is the core, which is his themes and characteristics. And I've separated into 6 segments. So if you ever go to the Life magazine, you can see my article there. But the fourth section is my understanding of Chan. So sometimes when we may understand a Chan, but we sometimes don't know how to use it. We might often imagine and enamor these understanding, but in practice it's difficult. So for particularly in the Southern Chan school, the application of non-duality seems very high-minded, but it's actually not. It's very ordinary and very saintly at the same time. But how do we use them? We have to first understand it. So how can we understand them? We might not be able to understand it like the ancient masters, where they can incite it suddenly. We might revere these concepts. We might feel like we have a little less vexation. But how do we understand? Understand this? We'll look at this on the fourth part of this lecture. So this is my attempt to provide a way for us to understand it, is to come from the worldly perspective, but also to explain it through the transcendent perspective. But for these ancient masters, they might go directly to the transcendent worldly or the absolute truth. So for us, we have to come from the worldly. So can I get a clock here? I can't see the time. Thank you. Okay, so we'll start with the biography of Master Yongjia. So Master Yongjia, he is born in he passed away in 113 AD. So it was around the Tang Dynasty. It was the peak of Tang Dynasty, and the year that he passed away, that was very special, because that's also the year that the 6 patriarchs the year that the 6 patriarchs passed. A lot of people don't accept that he has a Tiantai's master. He has a Tiantai's lineage, and so you start to see there's some divisions among the different interpretation from the different sects. At this time, the northern Chan school is very vibrant, but the Tiantai school is actually not very strong. But in the Song Dynasty, Tiantai was very more popular, and so they were borrowing from the traditions of the Chan school and pulling all the different masters to their own. And so his birth year, there's a 2 record. One of them is from two books. The time period was about 10th century, and his record is usually 10th century. And the 10th century is when these 2 books came out, especially the Zhu Tang collection, the ancestral collection. It was dug up from the caves of Dunhuang, and the
earliest literature is the Old Patriarchs collection. And Master Yongjia was kind of addressed in different works in the past, but then there were some differences regarding the birth year. Some of them record as Master Yongjia living over 30 years, some over 40 years. So because there's no certain resource that tells the birth year of Master Yongjia. So did Master Yongjia have a long life? No, not really. But he was living at a splendid time in history. So what about his family? We could say that all his family were studying Dharma. His brother was a very famous monk in the past, but now Master Yongjia might be more famous than his brother. He was living near Longxing Temple and was practicing very diligently and has very rich experience of meditative concentration and deep experience as well. And also was detached from the self, the form, and was also not influenced by the external environment, which was mentioned in the book Song Biographies of Eminent Monks. Well, you all know that there are many temples in mainland China called Kaiyuan Temple. That was because in Tang Dynasty, that was the best time of Buddhism in history. And all the governors, the emperors had their official temples. And all these official temples were not in the mountains, but in the cities. It's really hard to imagine now, right? Have you ever seen the structure of Chang'an City in the past? Actually, it was divided into different blocks, and each block there was a sample. So all these temples were not in mountains and was really in the worldly life, in human world. So he was living in the government official temple. And he created a small temple there for his own practice. There were different sources on this as well. And it was said that he was living with his sister and mother in the past, but he was mocked by other people because he was living with his mother and sister. However, he didn't really care about that comment. At that time, he was learning the different classical canon. Some people say that he was following Tiantai school and studying with the seventh patriarch, because he was in Zhejiang province, in the east part of Zhejiang that was very close to the sea. You'll be able to see where that is located in the map later on. He was living over there where Tiantai was very popular. So he was studying with the seventh patriarch of Tiantai. And in terms of Tiantai, it was quite famous, the idea of calming and contemplation. So it was more like he would be able to study from the easier one to the more. So there were some works by Master Yongjia that were kind of related with Tiantai school, where you have to study to contemplate, to detach. So this was from the book on the personal background of Master Wu Xiang. Well, it means the background means all the visits, the lives of that master. Then he was also studying with Zuo Xi Xuanlang from Tiantai. I'm not sure if you have heard of Zuo Xi Xuanlang before. Well, basically, he was the 8th patriarch, because there was some record of their conversation in the past about whether it would be good to practice in the mountains or in the human world. It was very brilliant paragraphs in that book. So it was practicing gradually by step. So next we could see that he was living with his sister until his mother passed away. And then he met Master Shen Ce or Xuan Ce. Some people say it's Xuan Ce, the disciple of the 6th patriarch in Chang school. So he was invited by Master Xuance to visit and study, where they reached Caoxi, somewhere in Guangdong today, where Master Huineng was practicing, and he was verified by Master Huineng. However, in the Song biographies of eminent monks, it was also addressed in that book. So he was studying not only to study with Huineng in the south, but also to study with other masters in the north, Master Shenxiu. So we know that Chan school was divided into the north and south. So we know that at that time, Chan school was very popular and eminent at that time. Almost like the guardian of the emperor family. So the early learnings of Master Yongjia was kind of spread. He was studying with Tiantai and also was studying with Huineng and was verified by Master Huineng. That is more from our perspective that he reconciles a lot more with Master Huineng. But if you look at the literature about Master Yongjia in the past, you wouldn't be able to see this song of enlightenment. But if you check out the Yongjia collection in the past, most of it was related with Tiantai. At the age of 31, he visited the sixth patriarch and was married and was given a name called One Night Enlightenment. Well, if you look at the histories of how different Chan masters were verified and enlightened in the past, you will be able to find Chan master, whether he was awakened or not, he would study with a Chan master for 20 years or 30 years. So there were a lot of disciples that were learning with Yongjia master, with Huineng master for a long time. However, Master Yongjia only studied with the sixth patriarch for one night. It was pretty short. So this is very special. He passed away. He was named Master Zhengjue, was a posthumous name. So that is a very brief summary of Master Yongjia's life. So he was studying and under different lineages and was finally verified by Master Huineng. So later on, we will be able to tell the differences between these three branches and then be able to tell what is not the South Chan and what is Chan school from the South, and how we were able to tell the glamour of the different schools. Where is Chang located? Well, we'll be able to see the Yellow River on the top, and on both sides of the Yellow River, you would be able to see Chang'an on the right. Can you see it? Chang'an is over here, and the green circle, and Luoyang is close to it to the right. So that was where Master Shenxiu was located into capital. It looks very close on the map. In fact, it's pretty far apart. So Yongjia, where is Yongjia located? That's in Wenzhou, over here on the right, and the blue circle that's close to the sea. That's the camp, the base camp of Tiantai School. There are two base camps for Tiantai. One is the pure Tiantai School, which is in the east of Zhejiang, and the other one is more mixed, where Master Shenxiu was Yunquan Temple. Is it Yunquan Temple? However, that part is a mix of different schools like Tiantai or Chan school. So the purest Tiantai school is located in the east part of Zhejiang. So at the beginning, Master Yongjia was studying Tiantai school here with Tiangong Huiwei Xuanlang. So what are the differences between these three different schools or branches? Well, for Tian Tai, like I mentioned, relatively, it has the sudden enlightenment, but also the enlightened gradual enlightenment. So, however, your background is, when you come over here, you would have your stage. So in the Yongjia collection, you'll be able to see the practice of samatha and vipassana, and to get rid of the evil dharmas. I forgot the pronunciation of Sanskrit. It's more like a sequence where you practice gradually, but does it have the component of sudden enlightenment? Well, yes, there is the grand calming and contemplation. So it might be different from what would is practicing from a reverse order. Well, if that's the realizing part where it is spoken, how would you do if you cannot be awakened? Then you take a step back. And if you cannot actualize that stage, then you take a further step back. And eventually you would reach the stage of redemption, to confess and repentance. The real function is for you to practice calming and contemplation. So you will be able to understand the thinking behind these different schools. The practice experience, if you have a very in-depth practice experience, then you would not necessarily need to start from zero, the first stage, but you will be able to start from the highest level and then gradually take a step back if you cannot obtain that stage. So what about the school in the north? Well, relatively, it's more of a gradual process. So the lineage from Bodhidharma has the core value, which is every individual, every sentient being has a nature, which is something that we originally have. However, all sentient beings are contaminated. That's why we're different from the Buddha, because we're contaminated by what? By our desires and duality, the perspective of duality, where we always think about things from a dichotomous perspective. And this is what we call contamination. So how should we do? We'll have to so this gate kind of tells us to see the absolute truth, to see, to get rid of the illusions, and to see, to reveal our Buddha nature. This will be easy to understand, right?
So for example, if the towel is dirty, we can wash it with a bleach, right? So we can understand this very easily. But in the Southern Chan school, their understanding, while they stand in the same perspective as the original Buddha nature, it's a little different from the Northern Chan school of Master Shin Shou. Now, what is it? So I mentioned that the Buddha nature was originally pure. Can it be contaminated? But so the Northern school is focused on on practice, that you can polish. You can continue to polish until it's clear. And the Southern school is a little different. They think it already is pure. And so the difference is that you should just only need to recognize that it is originally pure. If there is a process of removing, then there's a discernment of things that you want and you do not want, and that is the duality. And so for Master Yongjia's song alignment is trying to focus very much again and again on not trying to remove, because your original nature is already pure. On the other side of delusion is true. So if there is no delusion, then is there a true reality to be gained? So this dichotomy is the view of duality, which is false. So Master Yongjia says that the Tao or the way does not have to be practiced. You just need to recognize it. So it's they put a higher value on a right view and understanding over your practice and actions. So you don't have to remove your delusion, nor do you have to seek the truth. So this is the main difference between the Northern and the Southern school. Therefore, what is Master Shinshou's practice? You have to practice meditation. You have to reduce your vexation, to restore the light that was inside you. So how about Huinan? Do they focus on meditation? No, they actually sometimes they even rebuke those who are focused too much on meditation. So Master Wu says he has he has very strong meditation practice. He can cut off all vexation and all thoughts. And when they see all the phenomenon, there's no mind, no thoughts arises, and their wisdom is given rise every day after day. So if you see the Northern and Southern school, then what would Master Huinan says? Huinan would say, "Oh, I do not have the skill of meditation. But once your thoughts are gone, that means you're dead. All the phenomena that comes to me, I will react to it. If it goes away, then I don't cling onto it. This is practical in daily life. I don't have to enter meditation. So they do arise, all the minds and thinking, when I interact with phenomenon, but when they go away, I let it go. So how does and then he says, how does a bodhi wisdom grow? Then that suggests that there is a growing and less growing. But if we think about the Buddha Dharma, there is no long or short, no tall or no growth or non-growth. So do we teach meditation? Of course we do, but we'll explain this a little more further. So if we're not practicing the way, then what are we practicing? So some people will say, like, oh, if you're not practicing, then you might be kind of a wild wisdom or a wild Chan. So all Chan masters are like this. They will teach according to the recipients. So when anyone's teaching, you can't focus only on the Southern school. So therefore, we need to start with Chan meditation practice, because we have too much vexations and our levels are not high enough. So Master Sheng Yan it wants to teach the biggest difference between the Northern and Southern school is the gradual versus sudden. So from a Huinen's perspective, if we are all the same, then what's different about us and Buddha? What is the difference? What do you think? Has anyone read the Platform Sutra? What do you say? Oh, enlightened versus not enlightened. Awaked or not versus not awaked. So the difference is whether you're you're deluded. The deluded is is us, the ordinary people, and the awakened is the Buddha. If you are awake in this moment, then that moment you're Buddha. So if you are in delusion, if you continue to practice, then however much you practice, it doesn't matter. If you are already awaked, then you don't have to practice anymore. So why do we say that you can have sudden enlightenment? Because you already was Buddha. That's why you can enlighten in a sudden. That's why there's the talk of sudden enlightenment. But because we can't do that right away, that's why we have to gradually practice. So we have to understand these concepts clearly now first before we get into the Yongjia's songs, so we're not confused. And so therefore, the Chan methods of Huinan, it says that the meditation and wisdom is one. So you don't practice meditation first, then you have wisdom. There is wisdom within meditation, concentration, and there is concentration within wisdom. So vice versa. They're not divorced from each other. So if you start to see them as two separate things, then that is not true Dharma. That's why they raised. There's a practice that says no thoughts, no marks, and non-attachment. So in all the daily encounters, you maintain this one way. You do not have to practice meditation, because your original nature is not scattered. You were not your original nature was not constrained. So this concept, you have to be very clear. If we can be clear on this concept, then it will be easier for us to understand the following content. Is there any questions at this point? Okay, so we can also say that is the Master Yongjia's learning very holistic? There is the methods of the convenience method, like meditation to practice letting go. And there's also systematic understanding. He has that going for him. Secondly, he also learned from the Northern school. We can't. The Northern school also talks about Buddha nature, but it doesn't quite have the sudden enlightenment understanding of the fourth and the fifth patriarch. So it's actually not originated from the sixth patriarch. From fourth and fifth patriarch, they also say the same things, but Master Shenshou's is too much focused on the convenient methods, and he's too much focused on the removal of the of a vexation to see the pure. So there's less doesn't have the ease, and so there is Master Shenshou is too focused on the forms, and so they go for the counting the breath, but doesn't pay enough attention on the theories. So on the Huinen's side, its focus is on the understanding, because once you have the right understanding, then the practice will follow. So the sixth patriarch his practice is away from the duality. It's you are away from the dichotomy of pure versus the defiled. That's the characteristics. So while paying attention to your original nature and apply that to daily life and daily activities. So when Master Huinan passed away, he collected all his disciples and told them to when they're passing on his methods, they have to pay extra attention to the idea of non-duality. So normally in our life, we think about, oh, we need to pay attention to the good and be away from the bad. But Huinan will say that we have to, they'll say it's like, oh, if we are ordinary people, but we're also saintly. And if we talk about the pure, we can't say that there's the pure and there's bad, but pure and defiled are not different. They are not dual. So for example, Master Guoqi, he's a Chang master, right? So if you say things that have duality, he might scold you. So the Yongjia's songs of enlightenment is to pass on Master Huinan's Chan method, and so the songs of enlightenment is to present these teaching in poses. So he's not fixed on any sect. So how did he got his dharma? His name, where does his name One Light Enlightenment came from? So when he came to visit the sixth patriarch, and he walked around the master 3 times, he shook his staff and stood still, right? So have you seen the staff? Have you seen Xuanzang? Or actually, have you seen the Earth Door Bodhisattva? He has a staff. It's a really long pole, and on both sides there it makes forms a circle, and within that circle there is a smaller circle. The circle touches each other when you're walking and makes a sound. Why is that? What's that sound for? Why does it make a sound when they're walking? Oh, to prevent falling? What did you say? Oh, so to let the creatures know that you're coming, so they move away from you. Okay, there is that function. Yeah, that is one of the functions. But what about this? What is the sound? What is the sound for? Also, if the sentient being can hear the sound, that means that they're not far from liberation. So when we go receive our precepts, the staff is too tall. Every picture bring it back. There's no room. So in ancient times, when they're walking around for alms, that the sound lets the people who are living in the house can hear that their monks are coming. That staff is used to make a sound so that the people can hear them, and then they'll come out and give alms. That's what the staff is for. So he's holding his staff. So the staff also has a meaning to kind of shook to be awaked. Is that usually considered a polite or impolite? It's impolite, right? So sixth patriarch say, you're a monk. You should have the 1,000 forms of deportment and 80,000 specific practices. Why do you have such self-conceit?
Okay, Yongjia said the matter of life and death is great, and impermanence is rapid and swift. So birth and death is the greatest matter in life. when the impermanence comes, it's so rapid and swift, so I don't have time to bow to you. So what did Sixth Patriarch said? He said, why don't you understand the birthless and comprehend that there is no swiftness? So what is birthless? If we're talking about the empty nature, then that means if we have the conditions, that's living, but if there are no conditions, that's disease, that's birthless. So they all comes from conditions and causes. So what are the causes and conditions of this center? Well, of a factory, for example, we would need all these materials to be able to build a factory. Well, it cannot be birthed on its own. It has to be dependent on other causes and conditions. So that's why I say there's no death, there's birthless. It's not real. And that's when we say it's birthless, because then it also does not extinguish. So that means we would have more in-depth observation with bodhi, with wisdom. So what does project mean? Well, it means in-depth observation. It does not mean looking at something superficially, but means to observe the nature, the property of something, because it's all dependent on causes and conditions and cannot derive on its own. So are there dual sides for birthless? Well, it's impossible. It's also impossible to have being slow or being rapid, motion or stillness, coming or going. If we look at it from the absolute perspective and from the perspective of in-depth observation, it does not have its own nature or origination and decision. Most of the time, our ordinary sentient beings can only see birth and death. So those who have not awakened would be able to see permanence. However, those who are wise will be able to see impermanence, to see the birthless. We could also say it is the nature of the right path. So how did the Sixth Patriarch respond? Well, he was responding from the in-depth praja and wisdom to respond to that. Well, if you understand the birthless and comprehend there is no swiftness, then there is no swiftness, the idea. If you understand the birthless, then there is no swiftness. So Yongjia said that the essence birthless and comprehension is fundamentally without swiftness. So he immediately understood that I comprehended birthless and there is no concept of swiftness. So the Sixth Patriarch said, so it is, so it is. That's exactly what it is. That's a compliment. You're right, you're right. Like what you said. So thereafter, Master Yongjia did obeisance to bow and then with full ceremony. So he then immediately said he was going to leave. However, the Sixth Patriarch said, well, now isn't this really swift? Are you leaving already? It's like when all of you have come to the DDM San Francisco Center and then wave goodbye to the Venerable. Then we would say, well, why are you leaving so fast? You've just arrived. Why are you leaving so quickly? So Yongjia replied, didn't you talk about the idea of birthless? Well, the fundamental is itself motionless. So how can there be swiftness? Well, if I'm not moving, does it mean stillness? No, not necessarily. Well, when we say it's not a black cat, does it mean it's a white cat? Not necessarily. So when I'm saying it's motionless, does it mean it's stillness? Not necessarily. So there's no motion or motionless. Well, I'm not moving at all. So how come there is the concept of swiftness and slowness? Well, would you dare to say this to the master if it were you? Well, when we see someone with wisdom, we are kind of very nervous and then not being able to be really straightforward. But Xuanzhi was very straightforward and courageous in saying, well, didn't you talk about the idea of birthless? If you were the sixth patriarch, what would you say? Just say goodbye? No. So the sixth patriarch said, who knows its motionlessness? Xuanzhi said, well, you have just given birth to discrimination. So then subsequently, the sixth patriarch said, you have profoundly attained the meaning of the birthless. So is there the meaning to Buddha nature? Well, it's not the meaning itself. So what is the nature? It's the idea of emptiness or non-duality. Well, if you're away from duality, then you'll be able to deal with essence and influence. Because if there's a meaning, then if you're seeing permanence, then it's impermanence. If you see its meaning, then there is meaningless. And
you can say that this is and this is what I mentioned before. This is the influence from some people think that the Yongjia Song Enlightenment is not by Master Yongjia. So if you look up online, you'll hear a lot of discussion on who wrote these songs, because the content of the Yongjia songs on layman, a lot of the content was from when Master Shen Xiu, when Master Shen Xiu is because before that time, it was when When did the Yongjia songs come out? Because it was end of the 7th century. So at the time there was not a battle between the northern and southern school, but a lot of the songs, content in the songs have a lot of topics regarding the fight between the northern and southern school. So some scholars think that it's not by Master Yongjia. So that's not the point for us. Oh, so when are we only have 5 minutes? Okay, let me take a sip of water. So do you have any questions? So we'll go to the next, the name of the songs of enlightenment. So Venerable Yangqi Song Dynasty, song from Song Dynasty explained, the enlightened through the cause of conditions is actualizing. Practicing by thousands of saints is the way. And reciting the way is the song. Thus, it is literally called the song of actualizing the way, since one has enlightened and needs verification from a master to be verified. So when you experience something, you have to tell someone, you have to prove it to someone. How do you prove that? So you can't, right? So unless the other person has experienced it as well. Have you guys tried a berry flavored? Have you ever had berry flavored coffee? No, you have not, right? But I have. So the coffee tastes like blueberries. So I was like, oh, once I've tried I taste the coffee, there's a taste of berries. And so someone will ask, like, oh, is it a blueberry, raspberry, or cranberry? So this other it was like, well, why don't you just try it? And if they try it, they don't have to say anything. It's like, oh, that's what he meant by that blueberry taste in the coffee. So you have experience like this. We can play a game like that later. It's so you have to really have truly experienced it. Then you can truly let the person who has experienced it understand. So that's why we say to use our mind to communicate them to the mind. So you have to request from those who are awakened to verify you that you have enlightened. So it's like my example of the coffee, right? So once you also have tasted the coffee, then we can discuss that. So for those when you're talking to someone who has not tasted coffee, you can describe, oh, in the bitterness of the coffee, there's a taste of blueberry, and then at the end there's some kind of flavor. To someone who has not tasted this coffee, however much you describe it, they will never be able to understand it. They may say that they like, oh, I get it, but they don't really have experience. So there are a lot of different ways for these Chan masters to test these people. So only the person who has enlightened can verify. So we'll play a game later to experience. So what do you mean? What is the word the way comprised of? It's one part is the head, so it represents the spirits and the intellect, and then the other part is the chuo, which just represents time. It's connected, and it has there's a step, and you kind of go up. So there, but it also is a mean of going away. So in other words, we can say that the mind and the spirit is combined. That means that is the way. When what you know and what you do is the same, if you are only saying things but you're not actually doing it, is that the way? Is that a Tao? That's not, right? So if there's just knowledge and there's no practice, there's no experience, is that really the way? No, that's not the way. So even though when you listen to the lecture, if you understand it, if it doesn't turn into practice, then that's not the way. So the word Tao also has a meaning of kind of going away, right? The removal, the going away, removal of knowledge and removal of knowledge is also the way. This is kind of a negation method. So the way is in the absence of knowledge or the thoughts. And so in the head there is a component of the self, right? So there is, so the way, can we seek the way from the outside? You cannot, right? Because the way is within ourselves. So that's why when we say that we awaken into the way, what are you awakening to? You're awakening to what's inside you. That is what is originally in you, and that is experienced through practice. So that's the meaning of the way. So I have so I have a flower here. What kind of flower is this? Is it sakura, or is it azaleas? It kind of looks like azaleas. A cherry blossom. How do you distinguish between cherry blossoms and almond flower? A peach blossom. So the peach blossom has a corner. So this is what I particularly look for. This is the peach blossom. So there's a pointy petal. Pears have white flowers, and peach have pink flowers. So when we have peach, they usually have pink flowers. Oh, so some people have them there at their house, right? Are the flowers pink? So the peach blossoms. So we enlighten through the causes and conditions. Do you guys know Master Lingyou? There's a sect, Guiyang sect. That's the name of the mountain. And there's a master called Lingyou master. And so Zhi master learned from Lingyou master. So he learned from him 30 years and he still hasn't enlightened. So one day he was walking down in the valley and he saw the peach blossom in full bloom, and he wrote a little poem. Says in 30 years, and so he wrote a poem about the peach flower, and ever since he's never doubted. And he went back to told his teacher, and he says, what is the peach? The teacher said that the peach is the causes of the conditions of the outside, right? So the peach is not outside, it's not outside of him. If you say it simply, it's if we want to enlighten in ourselves, we have to borrow from the phenomenal world. We have to borrow from the environment. We have to use the environment. So if someone who has practiced a lot, you can keep doing that. You have to go down into the world to seek enlightenment.
The vendors can be on the streets, and you would pay to pass a vendor that sells pork, and you would be able to see the interactions between the vendors and the buyers. And then, well, and then if the buyer asks for a good high quality pork, the vendor will be really angry and say, which part of it is not of a quality? And then the master became enlightened. So what was the conditions there? That was the quote from the vendor, the seller, that made him enlightened. So are you enlightened? When will be enlightened? So the idea of becoming enlightened is not to become isolated, but to interact with everybody, to have that conditions and causes. That is the external conditions and causes, but there could also be the internal conditions, which is our own practice. Okay, next, we'll have an activity, which is a game. Only through enlightenment will one know the concept of mind-to-mind cell. So how are we going to do it? Well, if you are here physically, then you will have small groups for each table, one group for each group. I will distribute a piece of paper with a drawing on it, and only one of you will be able to see it. So let's have one from each group coming to the front to get the paper from Tina. Well, if you're just listening to the descriptions, you will not be able to see the picture. Please take out a piece of paper and a pen. And if you're ready, just start describing, and the others will draw based on the descriptions. So the oral narrator can sit opposed to the others on the table, so the others won't be able to see the picture. Please take the piece of paper on the table and the pen. Okay, you can get started when you're ready for 10 minutes. Or if you're joining us online, can you all hear me? Can you hear me? Great. Please take out a piece of paper and a pen. And please listen to my description. Please draw on the left of the paper to draw on a hexagon. You cannot use gestures to describe, just use oral narration to describe it. Okay, is everyone ready? And on the top of the hexagon, please draw a cylinder in 3D format. The bottom of the cylinder would merge the top edge of the hexagon. Okay, Arrow, ready? Okay, next, please draw another okay, so please look at the hexagon that you just drawn, and on the lower edge of that hexagon, draw a pentagram. Sorry, a pentagon that merges the edge of the hexagon in the lower part. Okay, are you all right? Now, looking at the hexagon, in the lower left part of the hexagon, please draw a cube in the 3D format. That can merge with the lower part of the hexagon. Okay, are you guys all ready? Okay, the last shape. Now, looking at the cube, that is of a 3D format, and the lower part on the right, draw a 2D trapezoid. The lower edge would merge with the lower right edge of the cube. So in general, in the middle is a hexagon. On the top of the hexagon is a cylinder in 3D. And in the right lower corner of the hexagon is a pentagon. And in the lower left part of the hexagon is a cube in 3D. And the lower part of the cube is a trapezoid. Are you done with your drawing? So please thumb up if you're ready. If you're done drawing, give me a thumb up. Okay, Serena is done drawing. Awesome. Okay, let's wait for other groups to finish drawing. The participants in the center still drawing. Coming to a full. Hello, everybody. I will show you the picture in my hands later on, and then you can compare it against your drawing and see how similar they are. Okay, we still have some time left, so let me describe a little bit more. Draw a hexagon in the middle of the paper. On the top, draw a cylinder. The lower part of the cylinder overlaps a little bit with the hexagon on the top edge of the hexagon. On the right, lower right edge of the hexagon, draw a pentagon. And at the lower left corner of the hexagon, draw a cube. And at the lower right corner edge of the cube, draw a trapezoid. The shorter edge of the trapezoid would align with the lower part of the cube. Omitofo. Are you all done drawing? The time is almost up. You're pretty fast. Omitofo. Please put down your pens. Let's welcome Venerable Changqi again. I have not seen the picture in the oral narrator, right? Okay. It's fine that you've already looked at it. Okay, so you've already reviewed the answer. That's fine. Well, please check with those who have already drawn in your group and see how different your drawings are. If there's sufficient time for this game, the participants will draw another piece of paper that's kind of agreed upon within your small group. And then check against the participant who has the actual drawing. Have you all seen the differences in your drawings with your group members? So where does that difference come from? Probably comes from not being able to hear clearly, or the participant not being able to describe very clearly. But if the narrator is very clear in his or her description, how come the drawings can be so different? Well, this is worth discussion. Now let's have the narrator show the picture to your group members. Well, participants who are joining us online, please check out the picture that we just described before. Or those who speak English can also take a look at this picture that Tina just described during this activity. I'm sure that your drawings can be very different. Well, it's like my Dharma talk, that everyone can have different understanding or interpretations of the talk. It's the same with Buddha. Well, the Buddha delivers Dharma talks in one way, but the way that the sentient beings can interpret and understand the Dharma can be quite different. It varies from person to person. So Buddha is really great in that even though he was delivering that same Dharma talk, he could benefit all the sentient beings who were listening. Even though people may have different interpretations and understandings, they may still benefit from the Dharma talk. And that's the merit of Buddha's Dharma talks, like we talked about in the Vimalakirti Sutra. So is that when you suddenly realize, well, that description of that line or edge is in this particular position? Well, if there's nothing you can do but to nod your head when you're listening to the description, that's right. So only the one who narrates it knows exactly what the drawing looks like. But once you see the drawing and then have the narrator describe it again, you'll be able to understand, yes, that's exactly how it looks like. So there can be limitless discussions about this activity, which means that you have all obtained, verified this drawing. Well, it's not Buddha nature for sure, but you will be able to verify this one drawing. So even for the song, Yongjia song of Enlightenment, it can still engender the similar situations that you encountered just now. Even though you may not fully understand it, that's okay. We still have a long way to go. But the moment you'll be able to understand it, that's what it is.
If you have not seen the image, whatever you say, you will not have confidence in it. So that's just what we're trying to say is, even though this is called a song of enlightenment and it's been translated into words, we can only kind of go at it from the side, and we can use analogies or other stories from the past to explain or to explicate these. But the reality check is we have to practice it. And so we'll take a little break. Oh, we haven't talked to the song yet. So what was the point of the song? So we'll take a break for 10 minutes. We'll come back in 3:41. Thank you, Venerable Changqi. So following, we'll have a 10-minute break. We'll go take a rest and go to the restroom. And thank you, everybody. Okay, please go back to your seat. Did you guys get a little bit of rest and some water? There's a lot of sun here and not a lot of moisture in California, so you need to drink a little bit more water. So the little game that we played, we had planned for. So usually after the game, we usually put this this slide on. Every word we hear is an opinion. It is not a fact, but a part of the fact. Do you agree with this statement? Everything we see is a perspective. It is not the truth, but a part of the truth. It's a very interesting statement. So we can try to experience this in our daily life. He tried. The only thing that they can explain or communicate through words is limited, right? But the reality is more difficult, and we're usually trying to, touching in the dark or feeling our ways in the dark. So what is the song part of the Enlightenment? So there are 1,814 words, about 264 sentences, and some people divide it into 36 couplets, or sometimes they divide into 65 couplets. If you go and make it to 65, that's fine too. But this takes the popular form of poem in the Tang Dynasty. And these are very common format. The most popular one is so these poems usually have the format of 3 character, and 7 characters, or 7 and 7 characters, parallel characters. So and they usually start with "Have you not seen?" And so what's the mean? To use a kind of a opposite way to start to start these poems. So we'll see later on that they'll see the format. You'll see that some of them start with 2, 3 characters verses, or sometimes they start with 7 characters and 7 characters. So except the very first verse, which is "Have you not seen?" The rest usually have this format. So these format are very easy to they roll off the tongue, and they're very easy to remember. So there's a lot of stories, the references, especially from Vimalakirti Sutra. A lot of them are actually stories from the Vimalakirti Sutras, and the most impressive part is that they're often condensed into these long stories from Vimalakirti Sutra into these short verses. So what's the benefit of this? Because they're classic stories, so it's easy for us to understand. So but what are the negatives? It's kind of, they're loose. They're often kind of loose, so there's not a narrative. So the topics will jump around and will be difficult to understand. So, but at the same time, they present a different quality, because it doesn't emphasize that there is not a sequence or not a hierarchy of it is going directly to our minds. So no matter where you start and where you read, you can benefit from this. So this is what I was saying. The benefits is the strength and beauty and catchy. It's easy to read, and the rhythms and common language to deliver this mystery of Chan in a very effective way. So this is simply for us to easy to understand. So the loose structure is okay because all it's trying to say is this one thing, right? So in the Song of Enlightenment is also within our great collection of Dharma drum, and so Venerable Guo Yi has also has given a talk on the entire song. So he said that when he's reading the song, he feels like he's climbing a mountain that is in a zigzag, right? So you're going a switchback form. You're going in a zigzag form. So there's a lot of repetition. So it's like a Z, right? So even though the topics are repeating or jump around, they're actually repetitive. And so because of this structure, it corresponds really well with the subtle enlightenment of the actualizing way, and really exemplifies the style and the characteristic of Chang. So why do they do this? Right? The words are represents the matter, right? The things that exist, but we're using the words to convey the indescribable. So the fish, so its analogy would be when you put a basket, you put the basket along the river and you try to catch a fish. Once you catch a fish, you can leave the basket there. Forget the trap. So well, because if the true essence cannot be explained by words, why did they go through all this extent and write down all these things? Because this is our pointer. These kind of serve as our pointer that point us to the right path. Or in one of the analogies we often say is the wind. So the song alignment actually says we need to anticipate. We need to have a hope. And so now we're going to move to the characteristics and themes of song of enlightenment. So I've divided into six parts. The first one is the non-dual Buddha nature. So when we say Buddha nature, can we say that it exists? Because that means you can't say that, because you're already siding on the side of existence. When we talk about Buddha nature, we're always talking about the non-dual nature of the Buddha nature. So whether you say that it exists or it doesn't exist, that it exists, you'll always be punished for it. When we say none or non-existing. In the Tang Dynasty, they speak a dialect of Heluo, which is similar to the Taiwanese dialect. I'm just making a joke here. So, well, regarding Buddha nature, you can't say that there is or there isn't. It isn't exists. It is non-dual. So we'll talk about the non-dual, the couplets that are talking about the non-dual Buddha nature. So the second is the methods of enlightenment. Even though in the Southern school that doesn't really talk about, it doesn't emphasize methods and practice, but there still is some method. So no thoughts, no object, and no attachment. So when we talk about no phenomenon, how do we go in from the perspectives of no phenomenon? There's still a method. So what is the method? It is the unconditioned. So it's sudden enlightenment through the realization of the unconditioned. So when we're trying to understand the Southern school, a lot of it is very illogical. It's kind of contradicts the logic. So sometimes we say, how do we gain wisdom? So you need a lot of wisdom, you need a lot of experience. So you have to learn from mistakes, right? So how do you learn from mistakes? You have to have wisdom. So it becomes a circular thing. It's an opposition. Somehow these illogical opposition can well together. So if you get too trapped in the words, then you won't be able to learn. So why is in Taiwan it rains, but in San Francisco it's wet? So there's some of the things that there's a lot of contradictory language that happens in Chang. So another one would be a woman that cannot get pregnant gave birth to a child. So that's another example. So the third example is the skillful use of enlightenment. That is trying to exemplify the benefit, the fact that it's beneficial for oneself and for other.
The fourth bullet, these daily activities of enlightenment, living as Chan. This is the very, very characteristic of Chan, which we emphasize on the equal status of concentration and wisdom. Before Master Yongjia became awakened, he was saying the hindrances of enlightenment, but luckily Master Yongjia was able to provide some solutions to clear those hindrances. And lastly is the advice on enlightenment. Well, you'll be able to see the wheat of Chan that is of equal status as the Song of Enlightenment, like inscriptions on the faith of confidence and other classical works. That are of equal status in the school of Chan. So the perspective of the others is actually integrated in the song. Well, these thoughts used to be really philosophical, but for the Song of Enlightenment, it integrates a lot of others' thoughts. So you can see actually all these examples of the author's thoughts in the song where the author actually verifies himself. That also includes his reflections, feelings, state of mind. It's not only introducing the philosophical themes in the song, but also integrates the author's perspective and examples. And that's why while you're reading the Song of Enlightenment, it's very close to your heart, almost like a wise person talking to you, comforting you, and helping you, and assuring you. Okay, now let's talk about it one by one. The first one, intrinsic nature of enlightenment. Well, the numbers correspond with the numbers in your handouts, because there were 63 couplets in the Song of Enlightenment. But if you're reading a different version of the Song of Enlightenment, the numbering can be different. You'll be able to see that the theme keeps jump around. Now, couplet number 17, this isn't something I alone have learned. Countless Buddhas have realized this intrinsic nature too. So in the Chan school, it emphasizes the idea that all sentient beings share the same Buddha nature as the Buddhas, are no different from Buddhas. And the only difference is the sentient beings are confused and the Buddhas have awakened. So the sentient beings have not awakened because we will be able not to be able to become awakened because we have all these ideas of wanting something, desiring something for something. However, originally we would have the empathy, the sympathy, and the wisdom of the Buddha, but we are hindered. And this is from the idea of the North school. But if we're away from all this discrimination, the wisdom would appear. Okay, now number 35, a single moon shines in every body of water. The moon is reflected in all waters of one. So the moon represents the Buddha nature. No matter how dirty the water is, the water would have the function of reflecting the image of the moon. And the water represents all sentient beings. We would all have the moon that we can use ourselves to reflect on. Next couplet, every Buddha's Dharma body is in my nature is one with every Tathagata. Again, this means that we are the same as Buddha because we all have Buddha nature. Because Master Huineng emphasizes the Southern school, in Master Sheng Yan's book, Shifu summarized the thoughts of Chang's school, which is to use Madhyamaka as the method. And the goal is to verify the Tathagata Garbha. This is how Shifu interpreted the Platform Sutra. He believed it was not only about the Tathagata Barda, but also involved the prana. So you'll be able to see the changes of Chen's school from the Diamond Sutra. But essentially, everybody has the Buddha nature and Tathagata Garbha. So in the song, it says, people don't notice the jewel among jewels, waiting for them in the Tathagata Garbha. Its sixfold powers are neither empty nor not. Its perfect light is neither visible nor not. So the characters in blue come from the Madhyamaka prana, whereas the red characters derive from the Tathagata Garbha. Are you able to see the red and blue characters? So what is the Mani jewel? It means that it can generate jewels. Probably in the Lakavaktara Sutra. The Lotus Sutra also talks about the metaphor of this Mani jewel. In the Buddhist stories, the Buddha has to seek for the Mani jewel because that generates all the jewels. And he had to give alms by giving the jewels. So everything was included in the jewel. So everybody has it, but we do not know about it. So where is that jewel? Well, it's hidden in the Tathagata Garbha. It's in your body, it's in yourself. It's probably just hidden at the edge of your clothes. You're the richest person in the world, but physically you're like a beggar. So the point is to look for that jewel within yourself. If we're thinking about neither empty nor not, and the language of neither visible nor not, is more coming from the perspective of Madhyamaka. If we're talking about it from non-duality, empty and not visible, what does that represent? What does empty represent? Well, that means it's absolute truth. So what does not empty mean? It all has the phenomena. But all the not empty is just a worldly view. It's not real. But the fact that it's temporarily existent and is not there are different. So the perspective of Madhyamaka is to experience both simultaneously. So how does it interpret emptiness? Once it ceases, it's empty. So like when I was describing the components of this object I'm holding in my hand, I have to use my language, right? You will need the factory, the materials, the staff's mothers to be able to produce, and the factory, the machines to produce this object. But the drawback is at the end of the analysis, you will still arrive at the minimalist element, the smallest element. Like how the scientists are studying the smallest material. So eventually you will still arrive at that smallest element at the end of analysis. So there is still something there. So it's not really experiencing the emptiness. So even though I'm seeing this object on my hand, I know it's empty, which is different. So Master Qingliang Wenyi in Chang's school, Fayan sect, in his verse, he mentioned that the monks are wearing black sweaters and seeing the bugs. And the flowers were red in the last year, and the hairs are gray today. The flowers used to bloom beautifully. But however beautiful they are, as time passes, they will still go bad in the morning of the next day. So you don't have to wait for the flowers to become withered to say this is empty. So for another example, let's say the beautiful girls at the age of 18 or 28, they're like flowers that are blooming beautifully. And once one reaches 30, they wouldn't mention their age. But even for young girls at the age of 18, who are like the flowers that are about to bloom, they're still empty. You don't have to wait for it to become old or become withered. No matter how young they are, it's empty. So I don't have to analyze it. It's empty and also not empty. So it teaches us to not depend on either side or not to depend on the middle side. So we're not attached to either side or the middle side. So anything that you would see that have opposing sides would be relevant to Madhyamaka prana. The sixfold powers means that you have all the different superpowers, superpowers. Next couplet, don't search for the truth and don't dismiss delusions, realize both dharma are empty and without form. Without form, but neither empty nor not empty. That is Tathagata's real form. So if you're away from the two sides, it's inconceivable. And the inconceivable is a real form of Tathagata. It cannot be conceived. It cannot be expressed by language or words. But do we have language and words? You can still use language and words. It doesn't really matter. Well, if you look at it, the red characters are Tathagata Garba, and the blue letters characters represent the middle way. When people ask me the source of my understanding, or you can see that the perspective of the author is already involved in here, I'll tell them it is the power of great wisdom. I'm using this great wisdom power. So it kind of reveals that it aligns with the sixth patriarch. That has the notion of middle way prana, which integrates both. So after what I've talked about so far, it seems very abstract. Not to mention that I have not verified. These are just my understanding of the language, the words. Have you all read the Lotus Sutra? After 5 bhikkhus got up from their seats in the assembly because the Buddha was going to deliver the Dharma. And before the Buddha talked about Dharma, the 5,000 people got up from their seats and left because the Dharma that you're going to talk about, we've not heard about. Everybody was very confused. So those who did not leave and were still confused and said, oh, I entreat you to explain to the fourfold assembly the reason why and free them from their doubts.
So the Buddha said, I'm not going to say it because even if I say the cause and condition, you don't understand. And why do these 5,000 assembly has left? Because they already understand it. Because and the Buddha said all these analogies and explanations, illustration are just useful means for the sake of highest complete enlightenment. Yeah. So some people don't believe that there is a higher attainment than the arhatship. So all that I said, if you didn't understand, you don't understand, right? Yeah. So in the Song of Enlightenment, there are a lot of these type of stories and references. So Yongjia knows that we need these analogies and stories to help us understand. So the most common analogy is mirrors. So in this 29 says, nothing obstructs the mirror of the mind. It illuminates all the worlds in the cosmos. Images of 10,000 things and appear rather inside nor outside. It's perfect light. So 44 here says that the mind is the sense organ, that phenomenon is its sense object. Think of them as streaks of mirror, and light finally shines when the streaks are gone. Forget the mind of dharmas. It's your nature that is real. So what is a mirror? What is the function of a mirror? Well, the mirror obviously has a function to illuminate, right? So if there's nothing in front of the mirror, can it still illuminate, or can it still show an image? So our conventional understanding is that it cannot, right? So obviously it has to have content that comes in, then it can reflect, right? So it must for a mirror there must be a ability to show image, and there's to be an object for it to show the image of. So when we say empty, what is that? That is the cause. And so when we talk about the Buddha nature, what are we talking about? We're talking about the mirror itself. So all the phenomenon, impermanent phenomenon, is represented by the content that's reflecting in the mirror. So can the mirror cannot show something for if there is nothing that is reflecting. So what does this tell me? So the phenomenon outside of the mirror and the image that's inside the mirror are not two, because they're coexistent. They have to be the same, because they are dependent on each other. So the mirror is not a real mirror in physical. This mirror is an infinite in size. It has no form. So just first imagine that an image that's in front of you, and it has to reflect an image of a source, right? So it has a once the source is gone, then it's not reflecting it. So reflect something else. So the content that's being reflected by the mirror is the source, what we call the source. So if you heard in the Platform Sutra, when he talks about the self nature, it is like the mirror. So when they say the mirror has a ability to show image, it's like our self nature. It has an ability to, or you can say it's like the Buddha nature. But the Buddha nature cannot be described, cannot be said. So, and can Buddha nature be described by language? No, it cannot be. It has no form. But does it have the function? Yes, it does, but it has to be presented in the mind. So in this Platform Sutra, it says that the nature is the king, and the mind is the earth, and the king is in rule of the earth, which is that the nature is giving rise function to the mind. Yeah, so we'll see later. So in the worldly phenomenon is comprised of the four great elements, and the image in the mirror is like phenomenon, or what we call dharma, another definition of dharma. So what is what are the five aggregates? So it is empty, right? So the image, the phenomenon is comprised of four elements that's empty. So is that separate from aggregates? No. It has to have the source for the mirror to show the image. The function of the mirror is the mind. It's like the mind. We often talk about function. That means it's its original function. When we talk about the nature, that's its body. When we say that the mirror is pure, so when there's gold in front of a mirror, or if the mirror is reflecting the human feces in front of it, is it dirty? So when we talk about when you're away from pure and the defiled, that's what we mean by it's undefiled. The mirror itself is in essence is undefiled. So why do we think that there is this dichotomy of pure and the defiled? It's because we don't see the true nature. We think when we see the pure, we think we are heading towards the pure, but we only see the source inside the mirror, but we don't see the mirror itself. So we have to see the mirror through seeing the source in that is reflected in the mirror itself. So even as dirty as feces are, even the source it's dirty. When it's reflected in the mirror, it is pure. So our self nature is the mirror itself, right? So the mirror does not move. It's always there. whether the image comes, the source comes in or not, and the image shows or not. So there is a rising and cease to rising that you see in the mirror. So the mirror, there is no gold within the mirror itself, but whatever source image comes up, it will always reflect it. So this is what we mean by it is complete in itself. The mirror itself doesn't move, even though it's showing the image is of moving tree is moving. And so you are always seeing the source through the function of the mirror itself. That's why we say the mirror or our self nature gives rise to all phenomenon. That's why we say that the real and the worldly is not any different, and that's how we understand the non-dual Buddha nature. So this is our way to ideally we want to approach this in our daily life, but if we cannot, then we can use this analogy of the mirror to understand this. If we can see that the phenomenon is not really the phenomenon, that means that we can see the true nature of Tathagata. And what is that? And that is the mirror. That is the analogy of the mirror. So what is the difference between the unenlightened ordinary person or the Buddha? So we'll talk about this later. So if you know this already, then we can so if both the ordinary person and Buddha has the mirror, then what makes a Buddha different from us? And how do we practice? How do we get to Buddhahood? So the song will talk about all that. So the mind is a sense organ and the phenomenon is a sense object. And think of them as the streaks on mirror, and the light finally shines when the streaks are gone. Forget that the mind and Dharma, it's your nature that is real. So we just said that the nature is the king and the mind is the land. So the king is controlling the land, right? So the nature comes before the mind. It's the source of the mind. But we can also say that both the mind and the nature and the mind is our source. So how about Dharma? Dharma is the all phenomenon. It's the phenomenon that arises and ceases. You can also say that the Dharma is the source of the reflection of the mirror, and that's what we call the dust, the worldly dust. So so yeah, when we talk about the mind, it is we have to, in order to see all the phenomena world, we have to use our mind, and the Dharma is the dust. So when they are both, the mind and Dharma are both just the source of the image on the mirror. They're just reflecting in the mirror itself. So that's why I say they think of them as streaks on the mirror. Yeah, so we do not have to attach to these things because we know that they're false. And the light finally shines through when the streaks are gone. So do we need to remove the streaks? We don't have to remove the streaks. Is if we can forget the mind and the Dharma, then the nature will be real. So we're not trying to get make stories around the reflected image itself. So that's simply just what the image the image that the mirror is reflecting. We have to see that this is the only way we can interact with, to see the image through the mirror. So is this okay here? So I have a master. I have a question. When we talk about the mind, is it the five, the mind, the five skandhas, or the consciousness? So when we talk about the mind, it's not always necessarily the sixth consciousness, but it's also all our sense organs be in front of the six consciousnesses can be considered as all of it the same. So it's not just the consciousness is considered the mind. When we see form or color, that is still considered form. The mind is the holistic essence. We can think of all of that as a diluted mind, because it arises and ceases. When we hear sound, it will change, right? The mind will change. It will arise and cease. And so if it's arising and ceasing, then it's not permanent. But when we talk about the true mind, the true mind is never moving. But the true mind is really is inconceivable, so it cannot be described by language. So we can't describe its essence. So once we change it into talk about it in essence, then that's falling in the realm of the duality. And so we'll talk about that more tomorrow. Is this okay?
I have a question. What is the nature? What is different, the relation between nature and mind? Is it the same as the ability to transform and transformable? No, it's not. They're unified. They're a holistic thing. It's a different way to interpret them. You're saying that the function of nature can only happen coming from the mind. But you're saying that it's just a different ways to interpret it, but they're actually a unified thing. Well, the nature cannot be conceivable or described by the language, but for it to have a function, it has to come through the function, and that function is called mind. But the real and the non-moving is the nature, but these two cannot be separated. It's like the mirror can reflect the image, but can we have no object to reflect it? But for sure, we need an object to have its reflection in the mirror. But once it's reflected, we know the image is not real. This is the limitation of language. But if its ability to transform transformable, that's a diluted mind and not the true mind. So there are different ways to approach it. Sometimes we say the ability to transform and transformable can be integrated. What you're seeing is not the external object, but is what's within yourself. Sometimes because of the limitations in language, we'll have to talk about an object. But what you're seeing, the transformable, is not the external object, but what is within yourself. So it's away from duality. Even including the idea of self and the non-self, which we think they're opposing one another. This is the greatest hindrance that we have, or the boundary that we have. So we have a self here, and then we draw a boundary between the self and the non-self. And this is also the boundary between the ability to transform and the transformable. But the metaphor of mirror is not the boundary between ability to transform and transformable. It's just about the mirror itself. So this is again a metaphor, an example. If we kind of dig into it, it might be some loopholes, but the metaphor, the goal of the metaphor is to use a specific example to represent a part of the Buddha nature, for example. What kind of metaphor can I think of to represent this? Okay. the metaphor of the mirror doesn't mean that Buddha nature is the mirror. It means the mirror has a lot of functions that can represent and reveal the functions of Buddha nature. So eventually we'll have to come back to Buddha nature once we're using a metaphor, for example, of the mirror in this case. Are you able to see the text clearly? So there's a mirror here on the top of the slide. Well, the external world that's not in the mirror is the world. But what's in the mirror is empty, is the form. So the world belongs to the world realm. But can the world Dharma be detached from transcending the worldly? No, they cannot. So therefore, what it's trying to deliver is there is non-dual. Does it mean that it actually exists in the world? No. That means once there is an original image, there is a reflection in the mirror. And that original image is the non-dual, is transcending the worldly. So this is the same as example I talked about between physics and gold. So physics and gold, once they're in the mirror, reflected in the mirror, there is no issue about being expensive or being bad, defiled. They're equal. So the 5 aggregates, that means this is within the mirror, but it's not actually existent in there. So for example, if we're using the mirror to reflect elephant, it doesn't mean that real physical elephant will be in the mirror. So the 5 category grasping, the 5 aggregates means that they're real. So in the real world, we have different categories like plants or animals. Once they're in the mirror, they're equal. They're empty. So we know that Dharma is the Dharma of non-duality, and Buddhism has a rising and ceasing. We have all different schools of Buddhism. We know that the Indian Buddhism has ceased, but that doesn't mean that there's no arising or ceasing of Buddhism. Buddhism is also about causes and conditions, and it would have different dharmas depending on the causes and conditions at different times in history. So how do we promote Buddhism? Well, come to learn Buddhism. That's a possibility. Okay, so that's also what we call the Dharma religious school and the teaching within. So if that's transcending the worldly, then that's unconditioned Dharma. If we're using, again, the metaphor of the mirror, once we have an image in the mirror, it's an illusion. We don't have to get attached to it. And that's the Buddha's view, to be able to see these images as illusional. So what is the view of ordinary people? We're not able to see the mirror, and we conceive and perceive them as the real, the reality. So once the vexations disappear and once we have the real wisdom, when we think they're real, then we cannot let it go. And that is the view of the ordinary people. Do ordinary people have mirrors? Well, they do have mirrors, but they regard the reflection as the real. Is the Buddha in the mirror? The actual Buddha, not in the mirror. So for the illusional Buddha in the mirror, you'll be able to find where the mirror is. Through chanting the Buddha names, is that the unconditioned Dharma? Yes. So from these signals, the symbols, we'll be able to find the Buddha nature. Okay, next is a quote from the Platform Sutra. Nature is the king, which is the root, and mind is the land, which are the functions, and the king governs the land. all the functions would derive from the mind, but not necessarily from the nature. It can only be revealed and manifested through the functions of the mind. The building of all dharmas is reflections in the mirror. Only with nature can we have the functions. So here are the reflections in the mirror. So the difference between the Buddha and the ordinary people, what is the difference? So why not think about it and consider the difference and try it yourself. If you're joining online, think about it also. From entering the world and transcending the worldly life. Okay, so think about the difference between the Buddha and ordinary people, despite that we all have the mirror. Okay, so please try to give some output as a learner instead of just passively listening to my lecture. Okay, let's have someone here to share any insights from your group discussion. The difference between sentient beings and the Buddha. But we think that the ordinary people do not know that there is a mirror. Yeah, that's one aspect. So ordinary people would regard whatever they see as the reality. So what about Buddha then? Buddha knows that there is the mirror. So do ordinary people not have mirrors? Well, they do have mirrors, but they do not know they are mirrors. Well, have a round of applause. What else? Anybody else would like to share? Well, actually, we're thinking, well, how does the perception of, for example, if the ordinary people and Buddha are all looking at a pen, how do their perceptions differ? What is their perception? What do ordinary people's perception of a pen differ from the perception of a pen for the Buddha? Well, we were thinking like when Buddha looks at it, they're just seeing the pen, the nature of the pen, the nature of ability and awakening. So whenever Buddha sees the pen, the Buddha may see their nature. So the Buddha would be able to understand the nature of their mind through seeing the form, and here, in this case, the pen. Very nice. Let's see what the third group has to share. Okay, I'll call on those who are not looking at me. Okay, let's see. From this group. Let's again hear what they have to say about the difference between the Buddha and ordinary people. Well, we do not really have a conclusion in our discussion, but we did talk about the ways that we describe Buddha and ordinary people. The first one is dreams. And then we talk about the awakened ordinary people are the Buddha. And the unawakened ordinary people, or ordinary people who have not awakened. I'm not sure how to illustrate the second part. The unawakened, those who are not awakened, are ordinary people. Where we're talking about the two metaphors that Venerable Guoxing used a lot. The mother in your mind is not mother. It's not mother is not mother. The second metaphor is the analogy of seawater and waves. Awesome. The mother in your mind is not the mother. What is the first mother? Is it the real mother or the mirror? Or the mother in the mind is the appearance of the condition, is not the physical mother. What about seawater and waves? How do waves come about? Well, we will need wind to generate waves. The ups and downs of the waves, which is, well, somehow you all have a concept of Chang school. And please try to study further. Well, the metaphor of the pen is pretty good. Let me try a different example.
So when we're playing in VR or AR, do you know that all the things that you're playing, the images are in front of you, that's not real? Or do some people know that you know, that you feel like you don't know that the VR and AR images are not real? For example, if you look at the movie Matrix, you know, they know ever since they were born that they live in VR and AR ever since they were born. So then maybe they may not be able to know that the environment that they see is not real. For example, like the meta, that's all virtual world. When we go into the metaverse, we know that is not real. When you see a tiger in the metaverse, would you be scared? You might be scared for a moment, but you very quickly recognize that it's not real. For example, will you say that, will you be so scared in the metaverse and faint and then go to the hospital and wake up and go back into the to the metaverse again? So even though you might have been rescued, you'll still be scared once you get back to the game, because you haven't truly recognized that it's not real. If you can recognize that the VR and AR are not real, then in metaphor, you are like the Buddha, right? You realize that it's all a conditioned appearance. So when we're in the virtual reality, we don't know that, so we get scared. You know, and when we're better, we come back and we're still scared. So when the moment that you truly believe that that is a virtual tiger, then you won't be scared anymore. That is another way to talk about the difference between an ordinary people versus the Buddha. So the ordinary people are basically like, we're all playing the virtual reality games. We think that the conditioned appearance in the mirror is real, but Buddha knows that that is not real, because Buddha lives in the self nature. But both of us have the self nature. So the Buddha lives in the Dharma realm, but the ordinary people do not know that it's a mirror's reflection, and they treat that the images as real. So Venerable Guoxing keeps reminding us, but we still think it's real. But if we see that as real, then we will want to grasp it, or we want to let go of it, and we will be obsessed with it. We're obsessed with self nature. So the mirror itself does not need practice, but our habitual pattern is that we are so used to seeing these conditioned appearances as real. So we have to, that is our habitual tendency. So we have to practice to see it as that is not real. No. When you, if you can see the mirror through seeing the conditioned appearance, then one sees the Tathagata. So our environment, our phenomena is created by our minds. So the every thought develops into form, and then the form develops into the world. So where does our thoughts and mind come from? It comes from our nature of mind. And so this is what the Tathagata Garbha is coming from. So the mirror, the function of the mirror is what we call that the the thought or through the conditioned experience, if we can see the mirror itself, then we're seeing the true nature. Me and the Buddha, we both have the same nature. So when we're practicing, what are we practicing? We're not practicing the mirror. We are practicing our pattern is to see that is real, that the image is real. So that's where we grasp and where we have aversion. When the Buddhist practice is from the self nature. So from in our day, it's the same as from our daily nature, daily life. So what is about Buddhism? Because we can't see the mirror itself, so we practice upward. So the only way we have to practice with the phenomenon. So when ordinary people, when we're practicing, we still cannot help but take and grasp the good and try to go away from the bad. So a rich person would always want to get richer, right? And if the things that make them less rich, they'll go away from. So for us who have more practice and more experience, we have to practice upwards, right? So what does that mean? You have to come to a meditation practice, you have to come to lectures, but these are still phenomena, these are still form. But we, at the same time, we recognize that this is still just a mirror, and we're practicing our true nature. So this is now it's 4:52 and our classes ends at 5. So the next section, we will talk about it tomorrow, which is the sudden enlightenment through the realization of the unconditioned. So the first one is the first couplets of the Song of Enlightenment. So the first verse says, the idle followers of the way, not studying, not busy, and not getting rid of delusion, and not looking for the truth. So what is not studying and not busy? So when we say not studying, you don't have to study and you don't have to practice. Originally you're already the Buddha. That's what we were talking about before. So we didn't become Buddha because we studied. How about not being busy or having no action, or in other words, not conditioned? So when we talk about what is having the conditioned, we're referring to a whole sorts of things. I can't refer it all, but all the conditions are arise from the causes and conditions. And when we talk about the unconditioned, it's not changed, it's not altered by the condition. So what is that? That is exactly the mirror. So when we say not studying or not busy, or in other words, unconditioned, that's Master Jichen often write the words idle. So because we have never lost it, so we've never been covered by these defilements. So do we need to? So do our Buddha nature need to be cleaned or to be cleansed? It doesn't, because we don't have to get rid of our delusion, and we don't have to looking for the truth. So the difference between the Buddha and the ordinary person is essentially whether we're deluded or not. So do we need to practice asceticism? No, we don't. Yeah. There is no real delusion or for us to remove, there is no real truth for us to look for. So the first two verse is written from a negating perspective, and so from the latter two section, the first two is trying to teach us to go away from the two extremes. So on the second two verse is we'll talk about this tomorrow. It's the first way is to be away or remove the two extremes, but the latter two is to talking about that the way they come together. The conditioned image is not separate from the mirror itself. They're not different. So therefore, ignorance, the true nature of ignorance is Buddha nature. Does that make sense? So the true nature of ignorance is the Buddha nature. And the next phrase, the illusory empty bodies is their Dharma body. Can you understand this? So the Dharma body is omnipresent. So as long as there's a cause and condition, they'll be reflected by the mirror. So all that is reflected in the mirror is illusionary. So all that can this illusory image be separate from the phenomenon, the condition outside of it? It cannot, right? So the Dharma body is essentially is like the mirror where all the conditions, when they appear, they will show up on the mirror. So one is coming from the perspective of going away from the duality to kind of to dispel or to be away from the extreme, or on the other hand, we are seeing these examples through the metaphor of the mirror. Okay, so I'm gonna, time is up, so I will give you some homework. So you have to do some homework for tomorrow. So the homework is very easy. So we all have okay, let's listen to the song first. Actually, the song is song is from Malaysia. It was a little kid who sang the song in Malaysia. The name of the song is the monkeys catching the moon. So when we use a mirror as a metaphor for Buddha nature, so it's easy for us to understand. So when we see it as real, it's as if the mirror in the lake that we're trying to catch. So it's useless, right? You can never catch the moon in the water, a reflection in the water, the reflection of the moon in the water. So let's listen to this song. It's a good song, but the pronunciation is a little off, so you have to read the lyrics.
Thank you very much. This is sung by the kids in the kindergarten in Malaysia. So what is trying to tell us? Well, this section is about the methods of enlightenment. If we know there is a moon in the water, like the Buddha nature that we can scoop, then we're like the monkeys. We're trying to scoop the moon out of the water. Then we'll fall into the water and get wet throughout. So we're all Buddhists if we're not seeing that Dharma is non-duality and still practice based on the phenomena of the form, then we're just like the monkeys, and this would be a hopeless endeavor. It's about how should we practice our habitual nature or in tendency. Later on, we'll talk about what are the wrong methods of practice. So what is the homework for today? Well, use your cell phone to search for the sounds of wind and water. So when you get back home, you can use your cell phone to record 3 sounds of water and 3 sounds of wind. And tomorrow we'll discuss where the sound comes from. The sound is the Dharma of conditions. So what is the nature of the sound? That means that every one of your recorded sound might be really different. So how come they're so different? How come there is this sound that you are recording? I'll discuss and share tomorrow. Well, it could be hard to record the sound of wind. Think about how you would record the sound of the wind. Where does it come from? What is the cause and condition for the sound of a wind? And what is the real sound of the wind? And this will be relevant to the follow-up class. Once you've done this search and homework, you'll be able to understand more easily once we go deep into the Song of Enlightenment. Please remember to submit your homework tomorrow if you're coming back for the lecture, and then we'll form groups to discuss. That will be the end of today's class. Thank you very much. Amitofo. Okay, now let's transfer our merit. Please join palms. I vow to dispel the 3 hindrances and all afflictions. I vow to attain wisdom and true understanding. I vow to eradicate each and every hindrance caused by offenses and always walk the Bodhisattva path in life after life. Amitofo. Thank you very much, everybody. Please join palms. Stand up and join palms. Please bow to the Buddha. Bow to Master Sheng, the founder of Dharma Drum Mountain. Bow to Venerable Chang. Amitofo. Thank you. Bow to each other. Amitofo. Please be seated. Thank you again for your participation today. Please do not forget to do your homework when you get back. And please do not get afraid of doing your homework and not coming back tomorrow. Wish everyone a peaceful and carefree evening. And due to the time limit today, we were not able to do the Q&A session. But if you do have questions, please write them down and we'll have Venerable to answer your questions tomorrow if there is time left. See you tomorrow at 2 o'clock Pacific time. Amitofo.